Yo, what's up YouTube? What's up Facebook? What's up world? Matthew Harrison Allen here making some videos. Check out my Instagram, Storm Grabber. Check out my Facebook, Matthew Harrison. Comment, like, subscribe. I'll do the same if it's honest. You don't have to comment if it's just, if you want to comment just a comment, that's awesome. But you don't have to fake something or like tell a lie or whatever. I wouldn't expect you to do that on your own integrity. But so I try to keep most of my videos anyways, I'm going to make a couple videos telling some cool stories. So I have absolutely no affiliation with the Hells Angels. I do not consider myself a Hells Angel. I do not want to be a Hells Angel. And I do not think I am a Hells Angel boy or anything like that. But my parents are from San Bernardino. My ancestors were in World War II. And it unfortunately is just a product of California. And also, I moved from Southern California to Northern California, and Sacramento and Redding are like big spiritual fortresses for the Hells Angels and all their affiliates, and the CHP and the Hells Angels infiltrated each other, and now they're friends. And it doesn't matter to me. If people mind their own business, I mind my own business. But when people, but I've had some crazy times with them. So one time when I was, so as I stated, this is once I moved up to, when I moved from Pasadena to Northern California, El Dorado County, Sacramento County, I had no idea or no care what the Hells Angels were. The first exposure I had to any sort of gangs was Sureños, and that was because I'm from LA, and some of the blood in my family, my cousins, is Mexican, and I ended up becoming friends with Southsiders, and that was that. That was the first exposure I had to gangs. So at the very root in my mind, any fear of retribution of a gang was from was the gang that I was involved in, which was the Southsiders, or that I, hung out with. And that was because some of the people that I knew who were Southsiders were from Mexico, and they came from a lifestyle in a part of Mexico where murder and weapons at ages 13 and 14 was not uncommon. And basically, from my perspective as a young adult, I basically met people who either were or very possibly could have been killers and they weren't or in any part of America at all. They had come over to America as illegal immigrants, either on the run or running from the gangs in Mexico. So it was my fear of gangs, any type of fear that I had as a young adult towards gangs, was towards basically Mexican Southsiders, who the culture that I was told was America's softies, and in Mexico you'll get killed in the street and no one's gonna care, big bad su trece, that's that. There's no Hells Angels and Bloods and Crips and Chicano and Northside, and it was straight up crazy Mexicans who kidnap and kill and murder, and that was the culture those were my role models, and that was also the fear that was put in me. Now eventually I grew up and I stopped fearing other men and other human beings, and I went to prison, and I realized, I fear God, and I don't fear, and you can die in any place. And yeah, certain countries are more crazy than others, but it's more So anyways, that was, like I said, I was a young adult. I wasn't really that big of a Christian, so I still feared other people at that time and what they could do to me. But my point is, I had no fear of the Hells Angels. I had no fear of motorcycle clubs. I had no fear of the Bloods and the Crips and the Northsiders and the Southsiders in LA. I had fear of people who weren't even from this country. That was the people that I feared when it came to gangs. So what happened was, and this is a Hells Angel story. All credit to the Hells Angels. I'm making this as entertainment, as fun for the Hells Angels. It's not insulting them, or I just think some people might get a kick out of it. So I'm living in Sacramento, and I go on this tailspin. I'm 23 or 24, and I go on a tailspin of violence and drunkenness that eventually landed me in prison. And where this started was, I was in a sober living, and I got an apartment with a friend, so that was older than me, and quite a bit older than me, and more experienced in drugs and the streets and stuff like that, for the most part. And we both ended up doing drugs in this apartment, which we both had come from a sober living. This is 2013 or 14. And we both ended up doing drugs. Okay, I drank and I smoked weed. He did hard drugs like meth and opiates and pills and that kind of stuff. But he was still making enough money to cover the rent. I was not. So we ended up having a huge fight, and he punched me up a little bit. And at the time I had owned 2 pistols. I had a Glock 40. It was actually a Glock 23C, and by 40 I mean it was a 40 cal. It was a Glock 23C, which means the model is 23, and it was a compensated barrel, which means at the front of the barrel there's holes at the top of the slide and the barrel. And what it does, when you shoot a bullet out of this compensated barrel, the explosion escapes out of those holes instead of the end of the barrel, and it actually forces the barrel down. So it uses the power of the recoil to help control the pistol. I never got to shoot this gun. I never had a chance to shoot it, but I purchased it. I've shot lots of guns in my life. I like guns. I'm not big on violence anymore, but I understand guns. I know about guns. I very rarely get proved wrong about gun trivia. I'm not saying that I'm some shooter who walks around and you know, I'm going to blow someone's head off. No, what I'm saying is I spent a long part of my life learning about guns, all types of rifles and pistols throughout history. I know how they work. I know how the physics works. I know about bluing. I know about reloading. I know about primers and rim fire and center fire and 22s and different names of different rounds and all kinds of stuff. So I had a Glock 23C and I had a Kar P9. And boy, do I miss this Kar P9. Because what a Kar P9 is basically, it's a little 9mm that fits in, and it was just small enough to fit in your hand, but it wasn't all weird and small like some compact pistols are, subcompact pistols are, but it also was big enough that it wasn't like odd or strange, because super compacts and subcompacts to me are very like weird, but it was small enough to fit in your pocket. I would carry this thing because I lived in Sacramento, and I, like I told you, if you want to call me a Southsider, so be it. I'm 32 years old now. I've been to prison. I've met shot callers. I've met people from Florencia, Tracy. I've met people from all different neighborhoods across California and across Atlanta and Texas and wherever else. And I mean, not too much in Texas, but different states, and I mean, the Southside 13 was a huge part of my life. I did not make this video to gangbang. I'm not trying to put my pride on anyone. If you're a Northsider, I'm not trying to make you feel uncomfortable. If you hate Southsiders, I'm not trying to gangbang on you. I'm just saying, when I was young, it was a huge part of my life. And just because I was white I mean, by the time I went to prison and was a white person who was eating and hanging out with Southsiders on the yard and during rec time, I mean, call it as you want. That's what my life, that's basically a part of my life and what it was. So being that I was living in Sacramento, I got jumped all the time as a teenager. I got jumped by Northsiders, by Bloods, and it wasn't because I was just some white boy who was walking around. They're like, oh, let's get that white boy. Like, I was decked out. I had LA gear on. I had Dickies on. I had high socks on. I had Cortez. I had Dice One shirts. I would throw up gang signs with my hands. I would wear bandanas at times, and it wasn't like I was just, it kind of was, but like I came from LA and like all the way back to like my father being in high school, like Sureños and Southsiders, Pachuco was like, my family was exposed to that. Now, no one else in my family is affiliated with the Southsiders in any sort of way, but eventually the fact that we were from San Bernardino, from Redlands and Loma Linda, from Pasadena, from LA, we move up to Sacramento, and I meet different Mexicans and different people who are actually in Southside cliques and neighborhoods, and that was just who I got along with, who I trusted, who treated me with respect. The blacks stole from me. The whites stole from me. I didn't get along with my white friends. I didn't get along with black people. They wanted to take advantage of me and rip me off and rob me. And it was just, it was the Southsiders, specifically from Mexico, who I became friends with and became affiliated with. And eventually when I went to prison, I went to a Southerner prison, Wasco, California, and 90%, and anyways, that's the story. So I got jumped. I got beat up. I refused to take my colors off, my clothes off. I refused to change who I wanted to be. I walked away from fights on multiple occasions where, Northsiders had me cornered, or I knew I was going to get laid out, and they would call me out. I didn't tell them like, oh, I don't gangbang, or I didn't take off my colors, but I basically walked away. There was multiple times, and then there was a 30 other times or 27 other times or 19 other times, just based on gang violence, where I stood there and I took it full force, whether it was 4 people, 1 person, 3 people. And eventually I decided I had enough, so I bought these 2 pistols. So I walked around with pistols all the time for about half a year or a year, whether I was going to college, whether I was going to the Walmart, and eventually I got, in the middle of the night, I was drunk and I was off Xanax, and I decided I wanted to get a tattoo in the middle of the night. So I drove down to Rockland, California, where for some reason I thought that there was a 24-hour tattoo parlor. Now, that is not the case. It was not a 24-hour tattoo parlor. And once I drove down this road and realized it was not, well, I'm drunk on Old English and blacked out on Xanax, I remember seeing the sign, and it was like some red and blue sign, and that's, I think, why I thought it was 24/7, but I know now that it was just like some tattoo sign. And excuse me, sorry about that. And when I remember driving there on Xanax and Old English and seeing the sign, and then I completely don't remember anything else. I remember a police officer knocking on my window. I was in a Ford Focus ST. It's a stick shift Ford Focus, a sport version of the Ford Focus, not those new ones that are hatchbacks that are turbos. It's the 2005 Ford Focus ST, which is like they're non-turbo. It has a Mazda 2.3 motor in it, as opposed to the standard 2-liter Ford Focus motor. It looks like a normal Ford Focus hatchback, but it has a nicer body kit. It has a bigger motor. It's faster. It's like the equivalent of an old Honda Civic Si, where it wasn't like the new ones where they're turboed and they're competitive with WRXs and STIs and whatever. So, but I'm sitting in this Ford Focus about a block away from this tattoo parlor in a town called Rockland, California, which is almost like a farming town. It's like out in the sticks north of Sacramento. And the reason I was familiar with it is because they have a really popular AA meeting right there, which I still would like to go to. And so I wake up early in the morning, and there's a Rockland sheriff or police officer knocking on my window. And for what it's worth, as many times as you'll hear me complain about being mistreated or abused by law enforcement, this was not one of the times. I was parked on someone else's parking lot, and I had an open container in my car visible through the windows. So basically, I parked my car in some like shopping, it was like a feed store or like a Western store or something like that, like a yard store, like not like it, like most of the stores in the area revolve around like yard stuff, like yard. And I'm not saying like Home Depot, I'm saying like the yard, like tree climbing, heavy machinery, feed stores, stuff like that, like a yard where people work. And so I was on someone else's property. The cop knocks on my window. He was not a cop, actually, for the sake of what I'm saying. He was a police officer or sheriff. He was more of like a countryman type of guy. And he's like, hey, you got an open container right there, blah, blah, blah. I don't know if that gave him permission to search the vehicle, or if I gave him permission to search the vehicle. Whatever the case, he opened my backpack. There was 2 pistols, dual magazines for both. And I got in trouble. So I went back to this apartment where me and this older guy had a falling out. We both came from a sober living. I just caught gun charges for the first time. I just got my first DUI. Lucky to God that they were not stolen weapons, that they were actually legally owned firearms. Now, in California, you can't store them with the ammunition in your vehicle. They have to be separate from the ammunition in your vehicle in a lockbox. So that was the problem there. But the thing is, they asked me, because I was blacked out, and they asked me, I do remember they took me into the police station that night, and they asked me, why do you have guns? And I told them the truth. I said, a lot of people tried to kill me in my life, whether it's exes who I may have cheated on, and their exes came and tried to kill me, or whatever the case. I told the police, like I told the investigators, the reason I have weapons is self-defense. I've had a lot of people come after me in my life. I was 23 or 24. I was tired of getting, and they kind of looked at it, and they basically let the gun charges go because the firearms were owned by me, and it's kind of like an old country boy type of county where I got caught with them, but the DUI stuck. The DUI and the open container stuck. So I go on this downward spiral of crashing cars and getting more DUIs. I ended up getting 6 DUIs within 4 months, and I did like 4 days of time, and I eventually just got shipped off to prison on all the DUIs. But in between these 4 months, there was one time where I had crashed the Ford Focus, and I got $7,000 in insurance money. It was such an amazing, miraculous act of God. So what happened was I was out of money, and all I had was my Ford Focus and enough gasoline to basically get to San Diego. And I was going to go see my friend in San Diego and try to live off of them, basically. But they had agreed to let me do that. And on the way there, and I was homeless because, as I said, I had this huge falling out with my apartment, and I wasn't paying the rent anymore. And I drove off the side of an on-ramp, and I crashed this Ford Focus. And I had good insurance at the time. I had insurance with USAA because my family had been in the military. And even though I was drunk, and even though I got a DUI, USAA sent me $7,000, $7,500 cash. Well, not cash. They sent me $7,500 to my debit account within a couple days of the car accident. CHP was called. When I crashed the car, there was no police or law enforcement around. One of the witnesses of the accident, who I consider to be a parasite, he ended up calling the CHP on me, and the CHP came and gave me a DUI, but I still got the insurance money. So here I am. I went from being homeless with a tank of gasoline and a Ford Focus full of my stuff to I totaled my car, but I had $7,000 and $500. It was such a big flip. So I went and I bought this Lincoln Mark 7, which is the 80s version of the Mark. I mean, the latest Lincoln Mark they made is the Mark 8, and that ended in 1998. And I'm sitting in one right now. This is a 1997 Mark 8. It's one of my favorite cars. The Mark 8 was made from 93 to 98. I'm not a fan of the first generation. That would be 93 to 96. They're ugly to me, and they're not. I would only really want to own a 97 and 98. I've had a 98 and a 97. This is my 97. The 98's long gone. They're great cars. They're fun cars. I love them. I thank God for this car every day, or as much, not every day, as much as I remember to every day. And anyways, but at that time, so I went over, so I got a ride over to El Dorado County because I'm sitting in this motel room, and all of a sudden I have almost $8,000 and nothing to do with my life besides try to make music videos for rappers in Sacramento. And this is right before Mozzie became famous, who I was in jail with, and coincidentally enough, or try to record my own music. And so I get a Uber or a taxi or whatever. I don't remember what they had at the time. I got a ride. I don't even think they had Uber or Lyft, but I got a ride out to, I think a female helped me out and take me out to El Dorado County, Shingle Springs, where I went to high school. And this woman and her daughter sold me their Lincoln Mark 7 for $2,000 or $2,500. It had 80,000 miles on it. If you don't know what a Mark 7 is, it's basically, it sits on the Fox platform. It's a big old car. It's the two-door version of the Lincoln, but that one had the 5-liter high-output Mustang motor. It sits on the same platform as the Mustang. The Mark 8 sits on the same platform as the Thunderbird, but the Mark 7 sits on the same platform as the, I believe it's a Fox body platform. But the Mark 7 is still a really cool car. It's ugly to me. Like, the Mark 7 has certain attractive features, like from behind, but like the front end and the grill are extremely ugly to me. And it's a good motor. It's a fun car to drive. The interior is beautiful. I mean, I still have pictures of the interior. It's very well made, but like in terms of attractiveness, it is not an attractive vehicle to me. And I would much rather have a Mark 8 over a Mark 7. Now, I would much rather have a Mark 7 over a first generation Mark 8, but I would rather have a second generation Mark 8 over both cars. So I go and I buy this Mark 7. I cruise around in it. I get an exhaust. I take some of the money I get an exhaust system. I cruise around for a week or two, and I get another DUI. So I go back to that same street, drunk, very drunk. But the thing is, I go to the same street where I got those gun charges, and I tried to find a 24-hour tattoo parlor. But the reason I went back there this time, and remember, I go from being homeless with a car to being homeless with $7,500, and I buy a car, and I still have to figure out motels and hotels, and I'm still deciding I want to go to AA even though I'm drunk. So I drive to the street in Rockland where 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 I had already got gun charges, and while I'm going there for an AA meeting. And so while I'm literally hundreds of feet from the parking lot of the AA meeting, and this is like Main Street of Rockland. It's like one of the main old streets of Rockland. Like it's one way both ways, like one or two lanes. There's shops on both sides. It's not like it's like an old town shopping walking area almost. So anyone who's driving up or down the street is like in the main spotlight, right? So there's a Rockland PD officer who's behind me, like not directly behind me, but like a couple cars behind me, and I think he was also in the other lane. And I decided that I was going to use my arm as a turn signal, which is perfectly legal. You can use your arm as a turn signal in California like this to show that you're taking a right, or like out straight to show you're taking a left. And for some odd reason, in my drunkenness, I decided I was going to use my arm as a turn signal. Now, this is the part that the police had no right to stop me. Because I used my arm, I pulled into the AA parking lot, and I parked in my vehicle. Now, what the Rockland police office did was circle around, come in the other side of the parking lot, and pull in behind me, which was completely illegal. They had no reason to follow me. They had no reason to stalk me. I didn't weave on the road. I didn't, go in and out of the lanes. And there was no way. Me using my arm as a turn signal is humorous, and it may have given him some type of evidence towards that, but it's the same as saying it literally is the same as saying that using your turn signal is a reason to get pulled over. So they had no reason to stop me. So what happened was this Rockland PD or sheriff or whatever they have over there, I don't remember. It was an Asian person at the time. And he excuse me just a moment. And the reason I say he was an Asian is not because I'm racist, but I'm pretty sure he was being racist to me. Like he wanted to put this little, is in his opinion, like wannabe white gangster or like white trash guy or whatever it was, wanted to put me in my place. And so I'm sitting there in my car drunk. But see, you got to realize that in California, if a police officer pulls you over on illegal search and seizure and gives you a DUI, that entire DUI can be thrown out the window. So if some type of law enforcement pulls you over or investigates you for a DUI with no probable cause, or on fake probable cause, or on bad probable cause, if you have the money and the knowledge to take it to court, you can have the entire DUI thrown out. Even if you blow a 0.1 or a 0.2, even if you go to the police station and give a blood test that says the same thing, even if you fail every field sobriety test, if they pulled you over for a bad reason and you have the lawyer and the knowledge and means to prove that, the entire case gets thrown out. It's like if the cops come and search your car or your house without a warrant or without illegal search and seizure, whatever they find gets thrown out. They can't, and if you don't have a lawyer or the money to know that and fight that, so I guarantee there's almost millions of people or cases or dollars that have been stolen and people taken advantage of and robbed. And that's one reason why sometimes I get into it with the government. But anyways, so this Asian cop comes up to my window. Hey, Mr. Allen. Hey, Mr. Allen. And he already knows my name magically. He already knows who I am, which is complete nonsense and baloney. It just shows that he's full of crap and contempt prior to investigation. And so he's, hey, Mr. Allen, you need to get out of the vehicle. And I'm drunk, right? So, but mind you, he had no reason to investigate me, and I'm already parked in a private parking lot. So I told him, no, ma'am. I said, I'm not getting out of the car, and you're not taking my car. You're not going to investigate me. It's my vehicle. I'm not going to allow you to take what's mine. You're a thief. Get away from me. And he goes, get out of the car. I said, and I pretty much told him, go bite it. I can feel the anger and the hate building up inside of me towards this thief, right? Towards this extortionist and this thief. So what he does is He grabs me out of the window. He pulls me out. Him and his partner pull me out of the window of my Lincoln Mark 7, throw me onto the gravel parking lot, and then him and about 4 or 5 other officers proceed to give me a full Royal Rumble. I mean, they laid it on me. They jumped on me. They did elbows and knees and punches and roughed me up and did all this other stuff and probably broke a couple of my ribs or shoulders or whatever. And it was so bad. It was so bad that later on, like 2 or 3 years later, when I had gotten out of prison, there was people at the AA meeting who found me and they told me, dude, we videotaped that what the police did to you and we think you should sue them. But I didn't have the money or the motivation to sue the police department, so I didn't. But I literally had people come up to me 2 or 3 years later and tell me, look, dude, that was police brutality and we have videos of it and we want you to sue them. So, but what they did do was impound my vehicle and give me a DUI and charge me with felony resisting arrest with fear of life or of an executive officer, which basically means, and they also published a false article which someone just tried to use against me in 2023 to try to attack my character through Airbnb, which is hilarious to me. Someone Googled me so deeply that they found this old fake article that Rockland PD posted, basically to cover up the fact that they beat me up and charged me with the felony, when in fact they were the one stealing my car. They were the ones committing felony assault. They were the ones stalking and harassing. And they posted this fake article that said I barricaded myself in the vehicle. And they went on my Facebook and took pictures of me smoking blunts with my tattoos and I had bangs cut at the time from like the Mexican hairstyle where you only have bangs. And they said, oh, Matthew Allen barricaded himself in the vehicle and threatened to shoot police officers. And he was charged with felony resisting arrest and blah, 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 and DUI. And it was all a complete lie. The truth is, I told them, no, this is my property. I refuse to leave my property, and I refuse to let you steal my property, at which point they whooped me and gave me a DUI and a felony resisting arrest. So, and what they also did was take my glasses, and I'm legally blind. I'm nearsighted, and I've had needed glasses since in first grade. Without my glasses, I think my vision is like, my contact prescriptions are like negative 4.5 and negative 4.25, and my vision is like 2400 or 420, whatever it is. So what someone normally sees at 20 feet, to me it looks like 400 feet or 500 feet, and that, so I'm legally blind. It says on my ID card, I need correctional lenses, and so they took my glasses and they put them in my car and they knocked me out and drug me away in the cop car or whatever. And they impounded my vehicle with my glasses in my vehicle, and they took me to jail completely blind. So in jail, I'm shouting and complaining that I want my glasses and I blah, blah, blah. And I'm angry, and all the inmates are telling me to chill out because I'm causing a ruckus with the guards. And the guards are telling me to chill out. We don't know where your glasses are. So I eventually get out, and I don't remember if I bailed out or if I got OR'd, but I'm walking in Roseville, California, which is like a Hell's Angel hangout, right? For the police, for the normal people, for everyone. And they even have churches there. And I know, right? Churches with the Hells Angels. It's hilarious. That's how far they've come. They even try to take over people's churches. And so I'm driving. I'm walking. I literally got out of jail, and I'm walking out of the jail, and I walk a couple miles to a hotel, whereas the last place I was when I had my car, and I'm blind. I'm legally blind, so I literally can see like shapes and figures. And there's some dude at the parking lot who looks almost exactly like one of my childhood friends. And mind you, this is a childhood friend from Rescue, California. And if you don't know where Rescue, California is, look into it. They've got Sleepy Hollow, and I mean, they've got Whiskey Pete's or whatever, Poor Reds. They've got it's Placerville, California, almost. It's another Hell's Angels central point. And when we were in elementary school, after I moved from Pasadena, we literally had clubs in elementary school. We had groups of friends that on the playground, we were clubs. Like, not because the teachers or the yard duties told us to do it, because we had groups of friends who were clubs, and we voted each other in and out. I mean, like, looking back, I had no idea that this was some huge Hell's Angels joke because of the fact that we're in Placer County and El Dorado County, where there's, I mean, hey, if you know about Placerville, and anyways, I was completely unaware. And the ironic part of it all is that we came from San Bernardino, which is supposedly the birthplace of the Hell's Angels. So I'm walking through the gas station right before I get to the motel I'm supposed to be staying at, and there's some dude in a car who calls me over. Now, if for some odd reason you are ever in a stressful part of your life, or you're ever in a part of your life where you're about to get to an easier part, and you have some type of calling, or you hear some type of voice, or you feel some type of spirit like offering you an adventure, specifically an adventure, I do not recommend taking it unless you want to go on like unless you want to go on like Navy SEALs Hell Week. Like, do not. Now, this adventure that I decided to go on, it made me tougher, it made me wiser, and I love the story as it is today. But when it happened, I wasted so much time and resources and money and it was like, if I was to know someone who I knew it was going to make them a better person, I'm not going to tell them not to go on the adventure. But excuse me. But for the average person who I care about, I'm not going to tell him to do it. So the guy calls me over, and he's a white guy, and he looks almost exactly like one of my childhood friends who I haven't seen for years, who coincidentally was, quote unquote, the leader of the club of friends in my school. And I don't think his family was Hell's Angels. Their family was a racing team, but it's out in this rural area where it all is part of the culture. So he even had like the same name. It was freaking Godly, right? So, and he calls me over and he's like, "Hey man, what are you up to?" And it's this guy, and he's a white guy, and he's about the same age as me, and he's got long hair, and he's got like red clothes on. He's got normal kind of like punk rock skater clothes on, and he's in this little PT Cruiser, and he's like, "Yo man, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh man, I just got out of jail. I'm walking back to my motel room." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And I'm like, "Yep." And see, looking back, being street smart, I should have never walked. When he called me over, I should have never walked over to him. Because usually the only time that anyone calls you over is to take advantage of you. Street smarts, street warning, mind your own business on the streets, keep your head down. If someone calls you over, say, "Hey, no thank you, have a nice day." Don't meet new friends on the street and go on adventures, okay? Because 9 times out of 10, they're trying to find someone to take advantage of, or to manipulate or extort or whatever. And you usually come out on the lower hand of it. So he calls me over, and I have no idea that this guy is like the nephew of like some Hell's Angel like higher up or something like that. But he calls me over, and eventually we're talking at the gas pump, and he's like, "Yo man, I need some gas money to get down to Redding." And I'd never been to Redding, and I have no awareness of the Hells Angels. To me, they're just some guys who drive around on motorcycles. I didn't know my parents were from the area they started. I didn't know that some of the things that kids did in my elementary school were probably taught by their parents who were affiliated with the Hells Angels. I didn't know any of it. I didn't know that red was their color. I didn't know that they had bums on the street. I didn't know Roseville was one of their areas. I didn't know a single thing. So, but all I know is this guy needed gas money. So he offered me that if I gave him gas money, and I had money at the time because I had crashed my car, right? And I got money from the insurance for doing that. And he offered that if I put gas in his car, he would take me down to Reading, which was like an hour away from Roseville, or like an hour and a half away from Roseville. And then he would give me an ounce of weed, which I was a big time stoner. So an ounce of weed was like gold to me. Even though I already had weed men. Weed wasn't legal in California like it is right now. It was only medical. So it wasn't that easy to get weed like it is today. But I already had money, and I shouldn't have done it. It was not. So anyways, we get in it. So I agree. And mind you, I've never really smoked meth before. I've only smoked meth like one time other in my life, and I did not enjoy it. It's not my drug of choice. I don't like stimulants. So he's a meth head or a meth user or whatever. And so first we go over to my motel room, and he smokes meth, and I think I smoked a little bit of it with him. And then he's like, okay, we got gas in my car. Let's go drive to Reading, and let's get your weed, and then I'll drive you back here, and I'll get some money there, and blah, blah, blah. So we get in his car, and come to find out that his car, his P2 Cruiser, is stuck in second gear. Now, I don't know if this car is stolen, and I still don't know today, but we took the back roads all the way to Reading going like 40 miles per hour. So we finally get to Reading, and it's like midnight or 2 a.m. or whatever. I don't have my glasses. I'm blind. My glasses are impounded in Roseville. And we drive up into now Reading is like, they have shops, they have stores, they have stuff, but it's also like out in the sticks. It's hard to explain without going there. I'm in Las Vegas right now, but I can't really compare it to anything except maybe like, I don't know what to compare it to without you going there. Like, so we get to Reading, and I'm blind, and I'm with this guy who's really cool and friendly, and he's gonna give me an ounce of weed, and we drive out into the hills, and before I know it, we're at a freaking, like at the time I told you I didn't know this, I didn't understand what it was. We're at a freaking Hell's Angels White Lightning still out in the sticks, out in the hills, literally out in the hills. And by that, I mean like a whiskey, what do they call them? Is it a distillery or whatever they call those illegal, they call moonshiners is what they used to call them. But it's a White Lightning still or whatever the word is out in the sticks. And he gives me a glass of White Lightning. And I take a sip of it, and that stuff is like Bacardi 151. And I'm like, like, I'm good, man. And he's like, yeah, brother, that's some. And he's like the same age as me, a little bit different size than me. And so then eventually we go off into this house that's also out in the hills. And there's some older characters who are presumably the actual Hells Angels. Now, this guy who I was with, I would consider him more like a family member of high-ranking Hells Angels. Not really like I don't think he was a vest-wearing member or I'd say he was more like a spoiled brat who grew up in the lifestyle and around real members, and he basically got all the drugs and freedom he wanted. And so we go into this house, and I'm like standing at the front of the house, and I wasn't like scared or anything like that, but it was obviously like a guarded house, probably because they're cooking meth or whatever. I don't care. And the old guy gives him an ounce of weed, and he hands it off to me, and they give me an ounce of weed, and we get in his car. So now I'm like, okay, let's go back to Roseville. Like, we got out here, And I don't think anyone's even mentioned the Hells Angels yet. So I just figure like, okay, these are some hillbillies, some white boys that are cooking meth and cooking White Lightning, and whoa, like I hang out with Southsiders, I hang out with Sureños. It means nothing to me. So we drive down into this like drug area in Redding, and this is where it starts to go south. Because his agreement was we'd go there, we'd get the weed, and we'd come back. Well, that's not what happened. So he's in this like stolen or broken PT Cruiser that's from an old lady or something like that. And it's got a spare donut tire on it. So we're not even supposed to be going over 40 or 50 miles per hour. Not to mention the car is jammed in the wrong gear or something like that, according to him. He never took it out of second gear, like the towing gear or whatever. And we go down to this drug area, and all of a sudden all these drug users start flocking to us. Because like I said, as far as I can tell, this kid is like the family members of high-ranking Hells Angels in Redding, California. So he's normally the guy who has the dope, who has the liquor, who has the weed. And, you know, there's like all these meth users start walking up just, you know, and a meth user is a lot different than a bully. Okay, so these meth users walk up and they're, hey, what's up? And his name was Justin. And they're, oh, what's up, Justin? What's up, Justin? Oh, you got, and, you know, meth users talk a mile a minute, and they're all, let's get in the car. So people start piling in the car, and I'm like, oh, God. Oh, goodness sake. I don't have my glasses. I don't have a ride home. He's supposed to be taking me back an hour and a half back to Roseville. It's starting to get really, really bad. And I keep telling people, like, dude, I'm blind. I need to go back and get my glasses. I need to go back. I need to go back. And they think I'm lying, right? So there's all these drug users flocking around his car because he got plugged with the dope or he got plugged with whatever. And there's females and men, and there's one member named Palomero who is apparently, or Palomino or whatever. He's apparently one member who actually is a known member of the Hells Angels. Because I remember another time I'll tell in a different story, I came across other Hells Angels who I had a better experience with, and when they asked me his name, they recognized his name. Now, in terms, I'm not putting bad blood on anybody. It's just like, so there was the kid who had obviously a lot of power just because he was the family. I don't know what the old guy's name was. Old guys in the house that gave us the weed. I don't know who they were. I don't care. I'm sure that they were probably vest wearers or they cook dope for vest wearers, or this Palomino guy or Palomero or whatever that type of horse is. He was like, but at this point, he was on the streets. So he gets in the car with us, me and Justin, and there's also like a couple females or another drug user. But and I'm in the passenger seat, and I'm like the new guy that no one knows. I'm like the VIP or like the special guest, right? And I'm blind. And I'm at this point, I haven't been to prison yet. I'm still young and skinny, and I'm not that good of a fighter. And up walks this skinhead. Now, mind you, even if the skinhead was not on drugs, even if the skinhead was on meth, he was not the average street meth user. He was more of he was like a bully. Like, if you can imagine, if you've seen Friday and you know who Debo is, that was like him, except for white people. And I had been beat up before, I had been jumped, but like I had never had someone just walk up and been like, yo, hey. So immediately Justin, like the guy, like apparently this guy put fear in Justin, even though Justin like knew all these Hells Angels or was their son or their nephew or whatever. And the guy who took me down there, and immediately he's like hiding his dope and hiding all his stuff, and I have like a cigarette on my lap, and the skinhead's like, yo, who's got the dope? Who's got this? Who's got that? And Justin's like, dude, I don't have anything. I have nothing. And everyone's like, no, we don't have nothing. It's just like Debo, right? And he's looking at me, and I'm like, who is this idiot? Because I'm not used to getting robbed. Where I come from, if someone does something like that to me or my friends, like we have retribution. it would have to be like very sneaky and very like people don't just walk up and take our stuff from us, like me or my friends. And so this skinhead, this neo-Nazi, which I hate the phrase neo-Nazi because Nazism died with Adolf Hitler. Skinheads are not Nazis. Nazis are German people who were fighting for the German nation during World War II. They are not white supremacists of the modern day white trash hick, garbage, bully, white trash those people are eating off the Nazis' plates. They're stealing symbols of fear from the Nazis, and they're fakes and they're wannabes. They're not Nazis. But anyways, he has like Swazi tattoos, and he's a wannabe fake Nazi. He's not a Nazi. He's a liar and a scammer who stole their symbols. And I despise. I've been to prison with skinheads, and they have neo-Nazi symbols. And I've met good people who use that symbolism. But what I'm saying is, I've met skinheads who I do business with and I respect, and they have swastika tattoos, but my family is actually German and they actually fought in World War II, and for these people to claim that they're Nazis is so stupid and insulting to me. And I'm not saying that every skinhead or person who thinks they're a neo-Nazi in prison is like an idiot or like white trash or a hick or like a piece of crap to do business with, but like the fact that these people use swastikas and the SS symbols and stuff like that is a joke to me. It's so stupid. It's like me walking up to a bunch of white people with Black Panther gear on and being like, I'm a Black Panther because of today, and I want to make these white people scared, and it's just so stupid. And but anyways, this guy was like a proclaimed neo-Nazi, which to me is just a white supremacist who uses borrowed, stolen symbols of fear. And he looks at me and he goes, well, what do you have? And I'm like, who is this guy? And I laughed at him. Well, that was a poor choice for me. I should have not laughed at him, because when I laughed at him, he punched me in the forehead through the car. And at that point, he like reached in and he stole my ounce of weed. And he also stole my cigarette. So I gave someone gas money to take me all the way down to Redding, California to go to like a Hells Angels hideout, get a taste of white lightning, and an ounce of weed, to only 10 minutes later get bullied and robbed by a skinhead. So everyone else in the car is scared of this guy, and they already lied and played dumb, and I'm the new guy, and I'm like, I don't have anything for you, jerk. I laugh him off, and he punches me in the forehead and takes my ounce of weed and takes my cigarette, and he's like, do something about it, and like runs off. And I'm like, are you serious? And all the other guys were like, dang, bro, you should have said nothing. You should have just ignored him. I'm like, thanks, guys. So over the next 2 days, or the next day and a half, I ride around with these Hells Angels rejects and Hells Angels families and Hells Angels street drug users. And over the course of this day and a half, I don't have a single time to take a dump. I don't get any food, and I was pretty much kidnapped. They made me change my clothes. I was blind. I was legally blind. I didn't have my glasses. They refused to take me back to Roseville. My phone died. They wouldn't help me charge my phone. They wouldn't. At one point, they went and sold dope to an undercover cop, because if you don't know, the Hells Angels and the police infiltrate each other. So we pull up to this big old Dodge truck, and there's some guy with a bulletproof vest on. He's so obviously a cop or a street cop or whatever. I don't care. Or a citizen who believes he's a cop. They sell dope to him. At another point in time, they take us into the car with other Hells Angels members who I now see. I think they even had vests at this point. They had vests, but I don't think they had badges on. I don't think they had patches, but like, they take us off in a different car. They lose all the other people, but me, Justin, and Palomino, and these other guys pretty much tried to induct me as a member of the Hells Angels. And if you don't believe me, that's okay. But basically what they did is this. The whole time during this day and a half, everyone's smoking. They made me smoke meth. They're like, hey, prove to us you're not a cop. Smoke some dope, blah, blah, blah. And I'm young and I haven't been to prison. And the only time I've ever really been around this kind of stuff is when I'm with when I'm with the other Southsiders. You know, when I have backup, when I'm in an area, in a neighborhood that I know, or that we run, or that and by run, I mean like we live there. We prosper there. So I get taken an hour and a half away with no glasses, no, I'm blind. I don't have any, I don't have, and they make me change my clothes and put on red clothes. The whole time I'm begging for them to take me back to Sacramento, like they promised, back to Roseville, like they said they would. And they're telling me, okay, we'll do it. We'll eventually do it. My weed got stolen. And I'm just riding in this car like, what the hell is going on? Like, I didn't think I was going to die, but I'm like 90% miserable with how my life is at this moment. And I want out. My phone is dead. It doesn't have service. And so they take us, so we go to this parking structure and then they're like, well, you're a cop. They're telling me, I'm like, dude, I'm not a cop. And they're like, you're a cop. I'm like, I'm not a cop. And they're like, you know what we do to cops? I'm like, dude, take me back to Roseville. I'm not a cop. I'm like, I'm not a police officer. I'm not a cop. You took me here and and they're like, shut up. Don't talk back. Blah, blah, blah. And like, so we get in a car with these other older guys who I believe now to be other Hells Angels members. And they take us off to a parking lot and they make us all bow our heads. And at the time I was like, what are these guys doing? But it didn't mean anything to me and it didn't affect me because I had already been around extreme levels of violence and witchcraft. But what I believe they did was attempt to induct me into like a Satanist community of the Hells Angels. Like they put some type of worry spirits on me or some type of Satanism on me that they do for new members, but it didn't affect me. And it didn't make me become a Hells Angel because I had already been around people who I thought would either going to kill or die me. And it had no affiliation with the Hells Angels. It had to do with everyday people and Southsiders. So this was like what they wanted it to be was probably make me fear for my life and then eventually make me a Hells Angel. Or a Hells Angel, you know, street person or a drug user. It doesn't necessarily mean like they were like, hey, Matt, we want to give you a vest. But like it was probably planting the seed of either trying to make me a street level drug user or I mean, the levels and the depth of their systems and there is way more extreme than just people with or without vests, right? So after that, we go off and now we go and pick up these homeless girls again and there's still more drug users with us. And at this point, I'm like, dude, I need to go back to Sacramento. I need you to take me back to Roseville. And they're like, well, what is the problem? I'm like, I'm blind. My phone is dead. And that's where I live. And that's what you promised you were going to do. So at this point, I'm feeling like I'm kidnapped, but I'm not going to call the police because there's a street code. And we're in this stolen car on a spare donut tire with all these meth heads, and I don't do meth, and they're making me smoke meth to prove I'm not a police officer. And I'm not scared, but I have no idea what to do besides beg to be taken home. And it isn't like anyone has beat me up yet besides the skinhead who stole the ounce of weed, but like I'm in a place that I don't want to be, and no one is holding their end of the bargain. And it wasn't like, oh, I got taken out to a forest and I thought someone was going to murder and rape me, but it was like I couldn't fight back with who I was at that time, and I couldn't. So what happened was the guy who took me there abandoned me with the homeless people. He told me to get out of the car with the homeless people, and this was like 2 days later, and it's still nighttime. I haven't slept, I haven't ate, I haven't used a bathroom. I've probably pissed a couple times, like behind a wall or something, and there's me, I'm in the passenger seat, and then there's Palomino in the back seat with the girl. And they're like, all trying to figure out what to do to me, because he doesn't want to take me back to Roseville. He claims that his flat tire is no longer good. He doesn't have the gas. He doesn't have the tire to take me back to Roseville. I don't really have any way to make him. I'm blind. My phone is dead. I'm stuck in Reading where I don't want to be. And I don't know anyone. I don't have any way to do anything. And so he abandons me with these two homeless people. And these two homeless people tell me to follow them, right? So they tell me to follow them. And what they do, because they know that at first, like a day or so ago, a couple hours, like 5 or 6 hours before this, they got so tired of me complaining that that I was blind, they tried to buy me reading glasses. And that just shows you how ignorant and how uneducated they were, that I explained to them that I'm nearsighted and how blind I was. And they tried to, give me reading glasses, which is so far from helpful. So what happened was they tell me to follow them. And now what they're doing is they're taking a trail down over a dam and under a bridge where the homeless people live. Homeless people sleep. And the furthest thing that I had been to homeless at this point was like sleeping in my car overnight. And so what they tried to do, and I remember this, and there's certain things that happen in life that I would never want to happen to anyone else. But once they do, you never forget how they feel. And basically what these people tried to do, knowing that I was blind, was walk me into one of the pitfalls of the dam. And they were talking to me and they were talking to me and leading me on like they were, oh hey, you got to stick with us. Justin's gonna give you a ride tomorrow. Don't worry about it. And then all of a sudden, I almost walk into this pitfall of the dam, which is like flowing water of like this huge fall, like 80 feet down, where I would have either died or no longer been their problem. I would have either died or or been sucked into the dam or washed up ashore and have no traces of them. But whatever the case, I believe they wanted to kill me, because as soon as I realized that I was almost walking into this damn pitfall, they looked back like, come on, baby, like fall in. And then when I walked around it, they're like, oh, and it was one of the most eerie, icky feelings of like, wow, these people just tried to kill me. So I'm panicking even more now, because it's like, okay, they want to kill me. My ride just ditched me and abandoned me. I'm with these two homeless people, and we go down under the bridge, and they're like, just sleep, brother. They're like, just sleep. So we're down under a bridge by Reading River, Reading Dam, whatever it is. And at this point, it's funny, right? Because the Palomino guy, here I am just trying to figure out how I'm going to get home from Roseville. And this guy, looking back now that I'm older and wiser, he starts fearing for his life from me. Because he's like, because all of a sudden, like I turn over and he jerks with his knife. And now I realize, I don't know if I realized it at the time, but now I realize like, oh, like he was thinking that I was ready to kill him when I was truly in a state of panic. And that shows how backwards that some of these evil people are, is like they are walking you into a trap, but in their innermost fears and thoughts, they are afraid of you killing them. So what ended up happening was I woke up the next morning under the bridge. I got up and I said, I'm done with this. I have to do something. So I walked away from them. I mean, they didn't try to stop me. They were trying to abandon me and kill me the whole time anyways. So I got up and I just left them. And I went up to a restaurant. I plugged in my phone. I got it charged. I got on the Wi-Fi or something like that. I transferred money from a savings account, and I ended up having to spend, like, I don't remember if it was insurance money or if it was money from a savings account that I tapped into from my grandparents that I wasn't supposed to use until I was older, but I found out I could use. And I had to spend like $500 to go back to Roseville, California. And I finally got back to Roseville. I went straight to the impound yard. I believe I got my car. I got my glasses, and it was like I was in heaven. I was so happy. Now, mind you, 2 or 3 months later, I went to prison, and this was a short-lived victory. But if anyone, like I said, this is a Hell's Angel story. It's all good in heart now, but like at the time, I tried to call my family once I got back, once I had phone service, and no one cared. No one believed me. I mean, it all started with me trying to score an ounce of weed and give someone some gas money. And I'm telling you, this was one of the most miserable, desperate times of my life. And I really do believe and feel like I was kidnapped just because of the fact that they wouldn't let me use my phone and they wouldn't, give me a ride back. But at the same time, I could see how that's not kidnapping because I was able-bodied and allowed to walk away. But whatever the case, hopefully someone gets some entertainment out of that. I mean, it's not a sob story. I'm not trying to make the Hells Angels look bad, but it's an entertaining story, and it's a story about what the kind of activities that go on with them up in California, in Northern California. So don't do meth. Don't go on adventures. Stick to yourself. Worry about yourself. Don't try to help people on the streets about drugs and alcohol. But anyways, much love. Like I said, please go to my Facebook, Matthew Harrison. Go to my Instagram, Storm Grabber. Subscribe for subscribe, like for like, comments, all that. Have a good night. Jesus Christ is King. Every knee shall bow.